Hello, and welcome to the second edition of FAA Safety Briefing Live. We are delighted to introduce the latest issue of FAA Safety Briefing, which is the May and June issue, an opportunity for you to get some very good information as well as earn wings credit. I'm Paul Prydecker, and I'm co-hosted by my colleague and friend, Susan Parson. Susan, the last time we did this, it was done remotely. Tonight, I'm happy to welcome you here so that we have a chance to do this together. So, how are things?
Indeed, it makes it much easier to coordinate a little bit better this way. And it's great to be here. Lovely to have an opportunity to do this again and to introduce the latest issue of the magazine. We're really excited about that.
Well, and we also have a special guest, which we'll introduce in just a moment. Just for our viewers' enjoyment, can you give us a little snapshot of your time and role at the FAA and your contributions to the magazine?
Well, I've been the editor-in-chief of the magazine since, I believe it was 2008. Sometimes it feels like a lot longer than that. But I also work for the Director of Flight Standards, do a lot of communications with that. And I have been the FAA lead on the Airman Certification Standards project for, I think it's 7 years now. So a lot of long-term things that I've been pleased and privileged to be part of.
Oh, great. For myself, I've been in aviation for about 30 years. I'm on my third career, and I'm currently a flight instructor for a regional airline and still very active in general aviation. So I like to sort of bridge the gap between general aviation and the airline world. So let's get started.
Absolutely.
So we mentioned that this is a great way to earn FAA Wings credit. For this presentation, you'll find a link on the broadcast page to register and take a quiz for the items that are covered in this course. And Susan, what's the best way to prepare for the quiz?
Well, we're going to present a lot of the material that you need to know for the quiz in this particular issue, but in this broadcast, but what we really hope you'll do is use this as an opportunity and an encouragement to go and get a copy of the magazine. We'll show you the link to get that in several different places. It's free. I think you will get a lot more out of the magazine and the course if you can not only watch this broadcast, but go look at the magazine. So please do that.
So speaking of the magazine and the contents, I know you're the editor of the magazine. Can you just give us a review of some of the key topics and the columns that are beneficial to our pilots?
Sure, absolutely. As what you see on the screen is we have an editorial focus. We're the safety policy voice for non-commercial general aviation. And you'll see on the screen, those are our 3 goals. And we have a mission statement for everything that's in the magazine. We try to do something a little bit different from what the community press does. We have a focus issue because we're looking for what one of my colleagues calls shelf stability. We'd like to have material that's available as a reference for you in the future. And that is a reminder to me, we have a great magazine staff. You'll see on the links page a link to information about them. I'm going to persuade a few more of them to join us in the future. They don't know that yet, but you'll have an opportunity to meet some of them in future broadcasts.
Thank you. So that brings us to tonight's topic, which is the May and June issue. And it's got an interesting cover. I see this mythical representation of PEGASAS. Can you tell us a bit about what that's about?
Absolutely. We are writing this time about one of the FAA Centers of Excellence, and we'll get into that in the content in a few minutes. But this is the one that is called PEGASAS. It stands for the Partnership to Enhance General Aviation Safety, Accessibility, and Sustainability. I don't know for an absolute fact that they came up with that name because it evokes the horse, which is spelled a little bit differently. But because of a lot of connections that we explore in the magazine, I thought it was a perfect thing. And we're used to having airplanes on the cover, but I kind of figured that if we had the horse, the winged horse, that it conveyed exactly what we were trying to do. So these are, you see on this screen, the slide, some of the articles that we explore from the research that PEGASAS, the project, is doing.
We'll look forward to hearing more about that as we work through this broadcast and work through the magazine. But before we move on, I'd like to introduce our special guest for tonight. This is Sabrina Woods from the FAA. Welcome, Sabrina.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Susan.
Hello.
Really glad to be here.
Well, you're going to be reviewing your the article whether or not, and we'll bring that back after we spend the time on some other things. We'll reintroduce you and have you go through some of that. But tell us about yourself and your role at the FAA now.
Okay, well, currently I'm a human factors scientist in the Air Traffic Organization, doing research and conducting human performance research specific to air traffic controllers. However, I'm an alumni of the magazine. That's where I came from. And so I'm happy to always go back and contribute whenever I can, because I believe in the content and what it has to offer. So it's definitely my honor to contribute whenever I can.
Thank you so much. We'll get back to you in just a few minutes. So once again, welcome.
Thank you.
So with that, let's start with the obvious. You mentioned centers of excellence.
I did.
Can you give us a briefing on centers of excellence and their role in aviation safety, and more importantly, the work that the FAA is doing to help the pilot group?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. What you see on this slide, we have two columns. These are both regular departments, jump seat and checklist. And both of these address what exactly is a center of excellence. So if we move to looking at jump seat, you'll see in jump seat, which is written by my boss, who's the director of flight standards. This is an introduction to the center of excellence concept. It's something that's really great for taxpayers. It promotes collaboration between FAA and the academic community. And this is a really big deal. The COE members, Center of Excellence members, they have to match FAA grant awards dollar for dollar. And that's a pretty big number, 300 million. There are 10 active centers of excellence. The first one for general aviation was established in 2001, and that was running at the time that I came to the FAA. PEGASAS is the newest one, and that was established in September of 2012. So this article talks in a little bit more detail about what they are, but you see the high points on the slide. When we get to the checklist column, which is one of my regular ones, this has got a map and a little bit of information about where the COEs are. We have 5 active ones in addition to PEGASAS. And if you look at that, you'll see the things that they're actually working on. Drones are a big deal. Commercial space transportation, alternative materials, a little bit of everything. And Sabrina's favorite, which is human performance. And then you have the map that shows the location. We've circled in purple Purdue, which is the lead institution for PEGASAS. So this will give you a little bit of information about something where this is your tax dollars at work.
So as I read through this is an excellent example of how government and academia are all working together in a cooperative way on a variety of projects. So how many are active at this point? I
believe we got that in the magazine. I think I said it a second ago and now I've forgotten. We got 5 active ones. It's right up there. So yeah.
Okay.
There are currently 5 active ones, and you'll see on the map the locations of the institutions that participate in them.
Very good. So let's get a little bit more involved and talk a little bit more about PEGASAS and that initiative. I note that in your article, there's things about the creative waters and the creative stream, and a lot of references to flow of sacred waters, all kind of relating to the PEGASAS myth. Tell us more.
I will. Well, I have to make a little confession first. PEGASAS is near and dear to my heart, not just because it's a flying thing, but I have a car. I bought my overdue midlife crisis car a couple years ago. It is a white Mustang convertible, and the license plate is PEGASAS with still a different spelling. So I was kind of attuned to this idea, and when we saw that this particular center of excellence was called PEGASAS, I started thinking about the horse, and I thought, I need to know a little bit more about all of this. And it turns out there are a lot of things in the mythology of PEGASAS, the horse, but one of them is that the horse stamped its hooves on a sacred mountain and released waters of inspiration that led the muses to create what they create. And so that made me think, well, this is a really good theme for us to use to kind of tie in the mythic inspiration that PEGASAS the horse did with all these really neat and inspirational things that PEGASAS the project is doing. So that's how it got going. And you'll see on this slide, these are some of the institutions that are involved and the research projects and some of the things that are going. And the Center of Excellence Summer Experience is about bringing new people into aviation and aviation research and things that we really need to have done. So it's really great stuff.
Well, and it's a fun way to express the work and to, you know, tell the story about what's going on. It occurs to me that when we have government and academia working together at such a high level with so many moving pieces, that somebody needs to be in charge. So who's leading this up?
Absolutely. Well, we actually introduced that particular person, the FAA person, in our FACES department, which is actually one of our regular departments at the end. Ryan King is our program manager, and you'll see some of his qualifications here: civil engineering degree. He's been in and out of the FAA. He ran the wildlife mitigation program for a while. And if you've ever, wildlife mitigation includes bird strikes, obviously. I learned, and Sabrina, I think you were still with us when we did some interesting thing. We learned interesting terms about, there was the term snarge. I think you wrote about it. It's one of the terms for what is left over if a bird hits an airplane, that sort of thing. But now Dr. King is spearheading the PEGASAS Center of Excellence, and we have his profile here, but I think he's also in the picture in the other article with some of the other researchers. So it's really great to have somebody who's with his passion for aviation and qualifications running it.
And I'm sure it's a full-time job.
I'm sure it is. Yes. I'm sure it's more than a full-time job.
Yes. Well, let's move on to one of the projects and one of the articles that are in the magazine. Pushing the Envelope is the name of the article, and it's really about angle of attack and angle of attack indicators, and a lot of research is being done towards loss of control. You know, as students, we've all learned, you know, the importance of angle of attack. We get an academic understanding of it, especially the critical angle of attack as it relates to stalls. Many aircraft actually have angle of attack indicators that are mounted on the side of the fuselage to send data to some of the other air data instruments to provide information about stall warnings. But it's sometimes a difficult concept to understand, especially when you tell somebody that you can stall an airplane at any attitude, at any airspeed, in any flight regime. So a lot of initiatives have come together trying to look at angle of attack indicators and given a visual display, more about energy management, that are really driving safety for smaller general aviation aircraft. So tell us more.
Well, this is one of the things, you know, because this is one of the persistent causes of accidents, and many of them are fatal, as it's shown on the screen here. And so it's always on the NTSB's most wanted list. It's something that we're trying to focus on in the ACS project. But one of the things the PEGASAS project is doing is trying to come up with some interesting new ways, including technology. And the work that they did, the angle of attack indicators are one tool. They researched that. They produced a video on angle of attack indicators, as you see here. And some of the work they did helped contribute to the FAA's what we call the NORSE, Non-Required Safety Enhancing Equipment Policy, which permits you to install non-certified equipment like angle of attack indicators on airplanes. Once you get into this article, this is just a screenshot of the first page. You'll see a lot more about the work that they did and some of the indications that indicators that they looked at. So because this is so important, PEGASAS has another angle of attack project that's getting going, and you'll read about it in this article.
And I first started seeing examples of some of the newer angle of attack indicators that provide a very nice visual representation. I first started seeing them just a few years ago at EAA, and it seems like every year there's just more and more.
Yep, and this is the kind of research that helps. We call it pushing the envelope. Obviously, that's a little bit of a play on all kinds of words, but research really is about trying to come up with new and different and innovative ways to do things.
And of course, the subject of stall training and how we teach that to our students is an important part of the ACS, and is being built into the curriculum all across our industry.
Absolutely.
So I'd encourage all of you to have a look at this. It's a very good summary of what's been happening with the topic of angle of attack indicators, some of the new developments. I'm sure there's going to be more, and I expect when I go to EA this year, I'll even see more.
I hope so.
So let's bring Sabrina back and discuss, her wonderful article called Whether or Not. Sabrina, I think I understand the basics of your article, and if I could summarize this, all of us are using some type of software-driven products in our daily life in aviation. We all have a variety of GPS units. They all essentially do the same, but they might present the information differently. And the way to get into some of the menus and maybe program them might be different, some more intuitive than the others. Is this where you're going with this topic about weather information and through the various weather apps?
Absolutely. So the team that's out at the FAA Tech Center that's researching these things, they're finding out that human performance is all dependent upon how fast and how well we can interpret information. And all these apps, they're amazing, they're great, they relay information very, very well. However, they all do it just a little bit differently. And as you pointed out, sometimes it's not as intuitive as you would think. Therefore, these little minor differences between your favorite weather apps can mean that somebody's interpreting that information differently than another person. Anytime you leave any room for broad interpretation, you introduce risk. It might mean that somebody's not understanding the information correctly, or they're perceiving something different than they should. And so that's some of the research that the team is doing to try to figure out how best to convey the information, how best is the information understood, and also just in general to give education to people who are using them that what you're seeing might not be what you really think it is, and that you really need to take time and care to learn the app carefully, and also understand that there might be some latency in what's being displayed.
So when you speak of just weather information in general, are you speaking of, the graphical products, or also some of the textual products that may also have the same problem of understanding?
Definitely both. The graphical representations, for the most part, a lot of the apps that are out there take their cues from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They already have a set of weather cues, like you'll see them anytime you turn on the news and you see the different weather cues that are out there. There's some basics that are followed. However, how they're actually demonstrated, it could be differences in color, slight differences in shape. It might be a triangle, but is this, is it an isosceles triangle or a right angle triangle? These different things can mean different things to other people. Also topography, how it's displayed. And some apps don't even display, they might display obstacles, but they don't necessarily tell you how far the obstacle is from the ground as far as AGL is concerned. Little things like that, all those add up. And so again, what the team is trying to do is not necessarily establish a baseline. They don't want everything to be the same, but what they want people to be aware of is that these differences might mean, so you can't just jump from one weather app to another, or even take what you know from that evening news weather forecast and apply it to your app, and it might not be the same.
So Sabrina, in your work, are you working, would you say, more directly with the pilot group or with the manufacturers to try to come up with some standards?
So with the techs, and I'm not actually on the team, I just interface with them quite a bit, because obviously a dissemination of weather for air traffic controllers is very important as well. And a lot of what we're seeing in the tower and the facilities are also different from what these weather apps are presenting. So not actually on the team. However, what they are trying to do is more gather the information from a cognitive human performance perspective, so that they know, okay, we're finding overwhelmingly that this symbol does better than this symbol in getting the information out there. That information is going to be relayed back to the manufacturer. So we're giving them, and they also are part of the research, and they're willingly a part of it, because of course they want their apps to be the best that they can be. So it's one part giving the information back to the manufacturer so that they can continually make their product better, but also, again, continuing that education outreach, particularly to the general aviation population, to let pilots know that, these are the concerns that we might have with it, and to always be aware that as good as they are, it's only as good as the algorithm that it's built around. And so just recognize the fact that subtle differences can mean a whole lot.
You told a very funny story about getting a message from your mom. I chuckled at that, but it's a great example of, how we all get wrapped up in this. Can you share that with us for a moment?
Sure. So my mother, bless her heart, has been learning how to text. And this has been an undertaking for me, let me tell you what, because my mom likes to call and she likes to chat, as all moms like to do, but I don't always have time for that. So I'm trying to convince her to text more. And I got her a brand new phone with a big screen so she can do that. And actually, the experiment's done well. She's done very good. So it's funny because now she's experimenting with like shortening text, textology like LOL and putting you instead of writing out the word you. But she's also been experimenting with emojis. And so she's figured out the smiley face. She's figured out the frowny face. So sometime after Valentine's this year, I got a text from her and it had the little poo emoji. Hopefully you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know what I did to earn the poo emoji. Is she upset with me? I don't know what I did wrong. So I text her back and I just said, hey, so Ma, is there a reason I got the poo emoji? And she was confounded. She was just like, what are you talking about? I thought I was sending Hershey's Kisses. It's Valentine's Day. And I was just like, and so it's funny, but it's a perfect example of, one person's Hershey's Kiss is another person's poo emoji. And to explain what I'm talking about with differences in symbology, that's a perfect example. If you pick up, let's say, a Samsung phone and pick up an iPhone, for the most part, they have the same exact emojis. They have a smiley face, they have a frowny face, they have a confused face. But if you notice, when you attach it to the text, they all look slightly different. And so there's room for interpretation there.
Sure. So you bring up a couple of other points in your article, which I'd like you to expand on a little bit. Can tell us about change blindness?
Change blindness. This is another reason why getting the symbols right and getting the alerting right is so important. Alert science, so the science of alerting somebody to something that's going on, starts out with attention capture. That's the very first step in an alert. Whatever the thing is alerting, it has to capture your attention. And what we're finding in our studies is that when something changes, something that's necessary that people need to be aware of on their app, they're not noticing the change. That, even if there's a big change. And so that is called change blindness. It just simply means that, we only have so many neurons that are bouncing around in our brains and they can only handle so much at a time. So usually, obviously the art of flying, it can be very task demanding. So if something happens, even if it's a big something, even if it's a big change, we just simply might not notice it because at that time our brains we don't feel that it's necessary. And so that thing that goes unnoticed, that alert to something different, like, hey, big weather storm moving your way, can cause problems later on because people are not receiving what's the next step in alerting, which is information dissemination. So if the alert doesn't get your attention first, the information dissemination part either doesn't happen or it does happen and people are confused by the information that they're getting because they didn't know the alert in the first place. So all of that is just a phenomenon called change blindness, and it happens all the time in our day-to-day lives. It's just in this instance, obviously, it can have more of a risk attached to it.
Earlier in your discussions, you mentioned latency. And when I think about that, I think about its application to the thunderstorm information that might be available. Is that what you were getting at?
Absolutely, yes. Again, we love our apps. They're amazing and we use them all the time. However, the information that's disseminated has a latency. It has effect. It takes a while for the system to aggregate and compile the weather information that's out there, capture it, packages it in a way that particular app displays things, and then send that information to you. We're finding out that lag can be anywhere from 5 upwards to 20 minutes. And as you all know, as aviators, if it's a fast moving storm, that 20 minutes can mean the difference between, a relatively clear, visible flight path and being in the soup. And so part of the concern is that people are using what they see on the screen as kind of like, this is real time, and they're flying according to that. And so the education that we want to go out and the outreach that the the WILD team and this particular PEGASAS team is doing is just hopefully encouraging people to understand that these tools are meant for you to plan with, and that hole that you think is there might not be there when you get there because of that latent effect.
Is there one, I think I know the answer to this based on how you just summed this up, but is there one important takeaway that you want pilots to understand about using weather apps?
Absolutely. They're wonderful. I certainly don't discourage using them. I encourage using them, but please understand that they're meant to be a planning tool. This is when you're on the ground, you're planning your trip, you're planning your, that everything goes perfectly the way I want it to plan. And hopefully you're planning everything's not going quite the way I want it to. This will be my backup plan. And then if you're anything like me, I have like a plan B++, where, if everything completely goes wrong from the moment I step out, this is what I'm going to do. It's meant for strategic level planning. It's not meant for tactical, shoot in the hole. They're just not that sophisticated yet. Maybe we'll get there someday, but for now, think strategic, not tactical.
I think all of us who have used those would agree with that. But I love my weather apps. I mean, it's brought
You're not the only one. Everybody does.
Brought a whole new level of understanding and also ease to some extent about the environment that we're flying in.
Yeah, I love mine too. And I hope that you will certainly get in and read Sabrina's article. Sabrina is famous. I think many people still remember the article she wrote about trying to make chocolate chip cookies without a recipe a few years ago. Her writing is wonderful. It's creative, and we're always glad when we can bring her in as a guest writer, and especially today as our guest on this broadcast.
Hey, it's my honor. I love it. I love being here. I love writing for the magazine, and I love what you guys do.
And we've got it on tape.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. And we appreciate all the hard work you're doing.
Absolutely.
All right.
So we have another topic to move on to, and this is all about lights, LEDs. I mean, certainly there's lots of innovation in the automobile industry and more in aviation. Airplanes are equipped with them, which is a whole new meaning to me, because as I get a little bit older, my night vision, of course, is not as sharp. Right. And being in an aircraft that has LEDs lighting the way certainly helps to find the yellow brick road when I'm trying to follow it at night. But also at airports in the surface. So tell us more about what you know about implement this into into our industry.
Yeah, PEGASAS has been looking at a lot of this with LED, of course, stands for light emitting diode, and they're increasingly used not just in airplanes but on airports because of the reasons you see here: safety, efficiency, cost, environmental benefits, all good stuff. But they've contributed, PEGASAS's research has contributed to the value. One of the things that I thought was particularly fascinating in here, and when you get into the article, you'll see some additional photos of what it is, but I love this idea of linear LED lighting study versus point source. Anybody who's been around a big airport, especially at night, point source lighting, that's what we're all used to. There are just all these lights, and although there are colors and things that are supposed to help us find our way around, it's very easy to mistake that. And so they've been doing research on the linear lighting. So you really would follow, maybe not yellow, but you would follow, you would have a line to follow that would outline the runway. And again, you'll see pictures in the article about that. Another thing that I thought was fascinating, as well as really important, is that they're studying things that are kind of behind the scenes, but awfully important. Electrical compatibility between traditional lighting and LED lights, and how to
compatibility in the airplane.
Well, and with the airport as well, because the airport is still going to have a fair amount of traditional lighting. But if they bring in LED, is that going to, what's the impact going to be, and how's that? Is it going to play nice with everything else? So there are a lot of potential benefits here, and especially for smaller airports, because they could end up, given the cost benefits, with better lighting. But it takes a lot of research to know what is and isn't going to work. So this was an interesting piece of what they're trying to do with PEGASAS.
Well, and again, I really appreciate the benefit of them. Like I said, I like flying airplanes that have them. They certainly make identification of traffic that you're looking for easier. And then just driving around the airports at night is so much easier. So it's another thing I've seen a lot of work and effort and new supplies at the EA convention in Oshkosh. And every year there's something new, and this has been one of the topics that I've been paying attention to.
Absolutely.
So speaking of runways,
yes,
PEGASAS also covers runway safety issues.
Absolutely.
And there's 2 articles in this issue. Remote sensors, rumble strips, and heated pavement, and something else about mechanics. So Susan, if you would take us through the first one.
Sure. The first one that you can see the oh my there, I was quite fascinated by this. I mean, obviously there are a lot of things with runway safety. There are things that pilots and anybody who's working on an airport needs to do to avoid runway incursions. But I thought this was fascinating for some other reasons. First of all, because I happen to be in Wisconsin right now, and although the weather here was much nicer this visit than when I was here at Christmas time, -12 is a tad on the cold side.
Well, for an Arizonan.
Absolutely. So this heated pavement technology, electrically conductive concrete, I'd never heard of it, but water repellent coatings, phase change materials, all sorts of really high-tech sci-fi sort of stuff that PEGASAS is using to conduct research on how to keep pavement clear. And I'm thinking that heated pavement might be really nice around here and also in places like Chicago in the winter. So stay tuned for that one.
Well, like I always say, you buy, I'll fly. So.
Yeah, there you go. Then another thing that they studied was, and this was more interesting too, rumble strips for airports. Of course, you know what rumble strips are on the highway. And the idea was, well, will rumble strips on an airport help you know that maybe you're not supposed to cross this or you should be cautious? But, you know, airplanes are a little bit more sensitive than cars, both in terms of props, electronics, all sorts of other things. So I think, you know, the takeaway from this article was that the rumble strips are something where there are mixed results. There are some things that are pretty good and other things not so much. But to me, that was also illustrative of what research is all about. You have to be prepared to get an answer that says maybe not this in order to get the things that say, oh yeah, this is really cool. And then another thing that we talk about in this article is the remote sensing light detection and ranging LiDAR, tracking aircraft with 3D images. And I think that is pretty neat too, because that's a way to help you know, yet another layer and another thing that could help prevent runway incursions. It kind of reminds me when they talk about these 3D images. I play with Flight Radar 24, and they've got this new 3D thing. So I've seen that. It's great. I can watch little 3D images of airplanes flying around over Google Earth stuff. So the things that we can do now is really neat. And I think this LiDAR detection, that has a lot of potential for safety. So great stuff in this article and great stuff that the project is doing.
Well, I've been anxious to see where it goes, especially the electrically conductive concrete. That's something I wasn't familiar with. It sounds fascinating.
I think you should have some here.
All right, I got it. And the other runway safety article is really more about traditional runway safety in terms of, you know, knowing where movement and non-movement areas are. This article is keyed specifically for mechanics, but certainly has application for pilots.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, we use nuts, bolts, and electrons. That's one of our regular columns, and we tend to talk about airworthiness type issues in here. Runway safety, you know, kind of like loss of control, runway safety is just one of those persistent things that we keep working on. So we talk a little bit in this article about what is a runway incursion. Basically, it's where you're someplace you're not supposed to be, and bad things can happen on an airport surface when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. But this is a review of best practices, and these, like you said, these are good for not only mechanics who might be moving vehicles around, but for pilots. Know the territory, airport diagram, understand communications. And I mean, this gets to symbology too. As Sabrina was talking about symbology, one of the things that I think has been done to improve the situation has been to standardize a lot of airport and runway symbology. It used to be kind of different every place you go. And I think you see that more than I do.
Sure.
So.
Well, and for our pilots, whether you're single pilot or a two-person crew, what we really stress, especially as our flight decks become more automated, we have such a focus on pushing buttons and programming things and setting up our GPS. Somebody has to have their head out the window and monitoring this. Sometimes I encourage people, if you need to take time to program something that's a change, stop the airplane, set the brake, take a minute, do what you need to do, and then move on, because especially if you're single pilot, you can be inside focus far too much.
Absolutely.
These are great articles. They're refreshers on one hand, and on the other hand, it's about new technology. So have a look. They're quick reads and good information in them. So I know that FAA Safety Briefing also has some attention towards helicopters.
Absolutely.
And there are 2 articles addressing helicopter and helicopter safety.
So the first one, it does focus on helicopters, although this is information that is also applicable to fixed wing. The singularity in this case is talking about data plus intelligent analysis. And this is a project, some of you, I'm sure you may have heard that one of the things that the air carriers do, Paul's obviously familiar with this, is flight data monitoring with all kinds of links to databases to try to pull everything together.
Absolutely. Trying
to do the same thing in general aviation with this, it's kind of an unwieldy acronym, National GA Flight Information Database. But this is work that's being done with what you see here, 11 universities, 70 corporate flight departments, and a lot of individual GA pilots trying to get information that you put it together. The data plus the analysis creates information that can lead to positive changes. So that's kind of the focus of this piece.
Well, and you have an interesting title. I don't know a lot about helicopters, but I know collective is something important. So I see in your subtitle about using collective data.
I thought that was fun too. This was not one of the ones I wrote, but it made me laugh when I saw it because, and that you actually give me an opportunity to bring up an interesting point here, or something that's important to us. The team, we work really hard to try to present this information in something that is a more interesting and engaging way, which is why we use PEGASAS as the organizing theme for this one. My view is that if it's boring, nobody's going to read it. And if we can't make it interesting, so we play with words. We do all sorts of creative things that perhaps you can't do in some of the FAA's more official / technical writing, but we can have fun here. And I think that's one of the reasons Sabrina liked working with us. So.
Well, and you're right. We are data driven and we're data hungry. We have information coming from our safety programs, from our onboard computers that are reporting flight parameters. A lot of this is being fed into a SIAS, which gives us a great deal of information about airport safety. Some airports seem to have a higher rate of maybe unstabilized approaches than others, so we have an opportunity to do that. So there is no shortage of data, but without turning it into some safety improvement, then it's just data. But that is our main focus, is to drive safety through data.
Right.
So your other column on helicopter safety is vertically speaking.
Yeah, vertically speaking is one of our regular departments, and it is written by people who are passionate, believe me, about rotorcraft. Those of us who are in fixed wing and rotorcraft, we like to tease each other, but we obviously are all aviators. And there's an outfit now called the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team, and they are working with a lot of things to try to reduce fatal helicopter accidents, and that's their goal on there. One of the things that is underway right now is airman certification standards for rotorcraft. This article goes through some of the other safety enhancements that are going on. Make model transition training, certainly that's important for a rotorcraft, but it's just as important for fixed wing, same is true with safety, culture, professionalism, and things like that. So just a quick summary of some of the really neat things that are going on in helicopter safety.
And I know you've been very involved in airman certification standards for some of the other ratings, and part of the emphasis of the new ACS is risk management. Is this the same story for rotorcraft?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been, my helicopter friends have been asking for several years now, when are you going to get to helicopter? When are you going to get to helicopter? And the answer was, we wanted to have the ACS, we wanted to first invent it, and second, test it, and third, stabilize it before we move to other certificates and ratings, categories, and classes. And we're now at a place where we're able to do that. So we're starting to pull together the first version of an ACS, and it's going to look and feel like the others: knowledge, risk management, and skill for everything that you need to know, consider, and do. But the difference will be obviously that helicopter tests are different, and some of the risks that are inherent in rotorcraft operations are going to need to be different as well. So we have a meeting coming up in June, and I'm sure I'm certainly excited to see what that team has come up with.
Perfect. So let's move on. Other projects that are highlighted in this article concern safety enhancements for power plant.
Yes, there's a group called the General Aviation Joint Steering Committee. It's a government industry team. I was on it several years ago in a different format. And the GA Joint Steering Committee, going back to what you were talking about with data, looks at data and tries to decide, what does the data tell us? What do we need to work on? Loss of control is always there. Runway safety is always there. But one of the things that's come up, and in a surprising way, really, is that there have been more power plant and what they call system component failures. So they have put together some safety enhancements to address things that have been identified in accidents. The first couple here are they go to multi-engine training, of course, VNC scenarios, multi-engine. But this goes to some of the stuff Sabrina was talking about. Smart cockpit technology can cut both ways. You know, I have a phrase that I used several years ago, cutting edge technology is great, but you can cut yourself and bleed that way if you're not careful. So, and then there's some more specific things in here, but the other is A&P education and training. And that, along with pilot education and training, is just enormously important. We have to get people going in the right direction. And I'll put in a plug here. There is a maintenance ACS that is currently posted on the webpage for comments. So we're moving in all kinds of directions with that project.
And just kind of to take a side here, there's a lot of discussion in industry about, pilot shortage, pilot qualification. I know full well that the same also applies to maintenance personnel.
Absolutely.
And there's many, many opportunities for the maintenance industry.
Yes, absolutely. And so the education and training, I hope, will also enhance the quality of the education and training people get, but also attract more people into that profession, because my club's airplane, our Cessna 182, just recently came out of annual with a new prop and various other things that happen at annual. And I care deeply about who gets to touch my airplane, We all do. So we definitely want the highest quality there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The next article is sort of one of my favorites. It's
nice of you to say that.
Yes, of course it is. You mentioned a book called Treknology.
Yes.
And I'm a huge fan of Star Trek, especially the original Star Trek. If I have an opportunity to watch reruns, I do.
You're missing it tonight.
I'm missing it tonight, but I'd rather be here. So. But as I have all of them, I think, saved up somewhere. So you referred to a book called Treknology. Is the future here?
Well, it's a great book. One of the things that I get to do in this final wrap-up column is try to summarize what we've done in the whole magazine. But I can also, I can do a little bit of free-range association sometimes. And I do read a lot. I try to read a book a week. And because I too am a Star Trek fan, although I kind of think I like Next Gen more than you do, but I'm trying to get you hooked on Next Gen. Anyway, Technology is a book that I thought was quite fascinating. It's written by an astrophysicist who is also a Star Trek fan, and he goes through a lot of the technologies in Star Trek. And they kind of come in three flavors. I'm oversimplifying, but it's kind of hard to summarize a book in a single column. There are things that have been already been invented, and think of your cell phone as one thing.
The communicators. Sure.
There are things in development, and artificial intelligence is a biggie there. I mean, the fact that even though it's not perfect, you can pick up your phone and say, "Hey Siri," that's starting to go in the direction of the Star Trek, computer, tell me blah, blah, whatever you need.
Well, and also an exceptional amount of work on augmented reality.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is, so there are a lot of things that are really in progress. And then the third category of things he talks about in this book are beyond reach. And the two that come to mind are warp drive, sadly. And the other is transporter technology, because we haven't quite figured out that Heisenberg
uncertainty
principle thing yet. I mean, really inconvenient details like that. But it's a great book. And the reason that it really struck me as being the appropriate way to sum this up is the book talks about the fact that some of the research that led to stuff we take for granted right now was actually inspired by that 1960s Star Trek you so faithfully watch. There were people who saw that, it sparked imagination, and then there was the why can't we do this? And Pegasus is all about taking imagination, doing research, trial and error, things that didn't work so well like rumble strips, things that are working really well like linear LED lighting, and really taking things to the next frontier, which is, and that we kind of sum this up with a little bit about the exploratory analysis project that they're going to be doing to try to imagine the proximate future. So it's great stuff, and if you're looking for a good read and you're anything close to a Star Trek fan, do yourself a favor and get that one.
Well, and in terms of just technology and how quickly it moves, I'm always impressed at how rich general aviation is, because they can have access to technology that is so much better and so far ahead of some of the airlines.
Yeah, I've seen some of the Jurassic jet flight bricks and thought that, gosh, the CAP Cessnas are better equipped up front. Yes. But so, yeah, it's really cool stuff.
Well, it's a fun read, and I've started to read the book Technology, and would highly recommend it to Trek fans and techies. We'll start wrapping up with just a look at a couple more of the magazine's regular columns: Aeromedical Advisory and Condition Inspection.
Yep.
So,
yeah,
go ahead.
The Federal Air Surgeon does the column for us, and one of his staff does too. In this case, this fit in really well with our research theme for this one. The Civil Aviation Medical Institute is working with the NTSB or acting on NTSB toxicology data analysis, and they've launched a study to try to determine whether post-accident toxicology results is really representative of the broader population. So it's very clear in this article that it's de-identified, et cetera. So if you've got any interest in that at all, take a look at the article. It's an interesting problem that they're trying to get a handle on.
And the next article really addresses something that's quite common for people, and that's over-the-counter medication for some allergies or the typical cold medicine and things. And there's some special cautions that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, this one is, this is the season. We also try to be consistent with not only the theme, but the things that are seasonal. And 'tis the season for what is called seasonal discomfort. There are a lot of things that people can take to alleviate symptoms, but one of the things that and people are not aware of but need to be is that Benadryl, which is a really common one, is a sedating antihistamine, and this is not something that mixes well with flying. There's also some good information in there about dosing intervals, how long you should wait before you fly after taking some of the OTC meds, and those are things that I didn't know before, and there's some good rules of thumb in there.
I was interested about that part of it as well. And of course, if pilots have questions, search out their AMA.
Yes, and we have a link in there to an AME guide that provides some more information. So we try to hyperlink things as much as possible, and you'll see the URLs in the magazine, but if you're using one of our electronic versions, you can usually go directly to that link. So okay. Active hyperlinks.
Yeah, it's a great story, and it's a good reminder for us to all be careful. The other article, the next article called ADIS, is sort of a catch-all of general news that you're covering.
Yeah, years ago, we call it, the name of the magazine was actually FAA Aviation News. We changed it because we don't publish often enough to really be news, but we obviously wanted to keep that. So we decided to call it ADIS for obvious reasons. And this is just our news roundup of little blurbs of things that we think they're not things that are going to disappear in an instant. These are just things that may have happened since the last time we published that we want people to be aware of. One of the example here, the transition from DUATs, the ACS updates, ADSB, and you notice that we have a lot of reminders in here that ADSB, the deadline is coming and the FAA is not going to extend it, so equip your airplane now. My airplane is equipped and I love it. I don't know how I lived without it. So it's great stuff.
Well, it's like trying to live without weather apps.
I can't do it.
How could we do that?
Right.
You also cover, drone and drone airspace. I mean, that's such a contemporary topic.
Yes.
Almost you can't pick up a aviation magazine without something about drones.
No, you can't. And in fact, we have in the works, we're going to be adding in the future a regular column on drones. We thought we'd be able to get it a little bit sooner, but not all the right stars aligned. So stay tuned for that one, but we will be addressing drones on a regular basis in the future.
That's great. So there's a lot to read in this magazine, and there's opportunities to provide feedback.
Yes.
I know you encourage your readers to give feedback. How's the best way to do it?
Any way you like. You'll see our email address at the bottom. We check that mailbox regularly, and people do get answers both directly from us in a more timely way, and then we publish some of the content. Obviously, we have to edit sometimes for length. There's a QR code you can scan. It'll take you VFR direct to the mailbox. So lots of ways to get in touch with us, and we certainly encourage hearing from people, including with ideas on what you might like to see us cover in the future.
Well, I think that's an important point. I mean, you're serving the pilots, and it's aviation people, and it's their magazine, and I'm sure a lot of information can come directly from them.
And I'd like to point out the staff, everybody on the staff has some connection to aviation. Serena certainly did when she was with us, and everybody on the staff, we've got several people, pilots, one with a mechanic's certificate. Mm-hmm. Everybody's active, everybody cares. We're here and we do this job because we love what we do. Can you review where to find the magazine, please? Yes, indeed. You'll find on the next slide, lots of ways to find us. You can subscribe and to a print edition, and lots of people like to do that. But we have free downloads in various electronic formats. You can follow us on social media. We contribute a lot to the FAA's Facebook page, but we have our own social media feed on Twitter at FAA Safety Brief. So we keep that up on a regular basis and try to be active where everybody else is playing. And I know the archived issues of FAA Safety Briefing, are they directly on the FAA website? Yes, they are. There's a link at the bottom that says archived issues, and if you go to that, you can go to it and download them the same way that you can the most recent ones. So. Okay. Lots of opportunities to get the information. For some of us, I still like the paper version of things. I like paper, but I know a lot of people are using their apps. So the next issue of FAA Safety Briefing is going to be the July and August issue, and it has a special theme. Yes. I recognize this from Casablanca. Yes. And I know a little bit about how you developed the Casablanca theme. I stole it from you. I know you did. It all kind of started with one of the very famous quotes in there about round up the usual suspects.
So tell us what you have in mind.
Well, when we were doing the planning a few months ago, somebody said, well, we need to do something on, some of these topics we've talked about today as topics that, continue to cause problems in GA. And at first I kind of rolled my eyes like, oh, I don't want to do that again. And then suddenly I remembered your roundup the usual suspects. And I thought, oh, wow, wouldn't it be fun if we could wrap it all up in Casablanca? So we have been writing, and I'm thrilled to report that Sabrina has already contributed her piece for that issue. And my I don't know if you could call it suggestion, I think it was a little bit stronger than that. Instructions to everybody was there needs to be something connected to Casablanca in the article. And so we've embedded a lot of lines and quotes, and I think we're going to run a little contest, just see who can identify the greatest number of lines, references, and probably extra credit if you can do the speaker and the scene. So if you haven't seen the movie, that's a great movie to watch just for fun, whether or not you like airplanes. But it would be great prep for the next issue of the magazine, which we're wrapping up the writing right now.
Well, I love the movie. It's got everything you could want. It's got airplanes and a love story. So
yeah. What else is there?
So it's just perfect. And we will actually be co-hosting a presentation of this issue at the FAA Safety Center at AirVenture in July. So I'll be practicing my lines for that.
Well, and I'm going to be looking for my Ingrid Bergman costume because I think I want to wear one of those hats, and I got to figure out what to wear, costuming and all that.
Always trying to make a fashion statement.
You bet.
All right. So I'd like to bring back Sabrina into the wrap up, and just to once again say thank you so much for everything you're doing for aviation safety. You've got an important task ahead of you, and I'm sure that the industry will be the benefactors of all of your research.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you to Sabrina. I'd also like to say thank you to the staff, Tom Hoffman, Paul Cianciolo, Jennifer Karen, and James Williams, who contribute a lot. Tom is the managing editor, handles a lot of the day-to-day stuff. Tried to get him involved tonight, but he had babysitting duty, or at least that was what he told me. So sorry he couldn't join us, but you'll be seeing him and meeting some of the other staff in future issues. I'd also like to say a big thank you to John Typen, who is the genius behind the he's the man behind the camera that you can't see, but he's the person who's making it all go.
Well, this is another example of how wonderful technology is. We're sitting in Wisconsin, and this whole thing is being orchestrated in St. Louis, I believe.
And I think, Sabrina, you're in Washington?
Yeah.
Arlington, somewhere.
Yeah. So technology is good.
It is.
This wraps up the Safety Briefing Live for this issue. We'll look forward to doing the next one, which will be the Casablanca issue. Thanks to you, Susan, for being available here.
Absolutely.
And again to Sabrina. And we'll see you next time.
And don't forget to go and get Wings credit for the course. Hope you enjoy it.
Take care.